We've got flags and banners, and if you mind your manners, we might even get to standards and what they represent. So just take my voice's hand and we'll both try to understand how this vexillologic podcast could be flagged for content. Flagged for content.
What's up, VexHeads, and welcome to episode 68 of Flagged for Content. It's the only flag podcast for now. There's actually a new one starting up, I believe, in the UK. They don't have an episode out yet, but I've been following them. They are at Flag Day Podcast on Instagram, possibly other social media. But yeah, I am excited to welcome somebody else into the space and kind of see what they do with it. So go give them a follow and obviously a listen when episode 1 drops. Flags for Content is also a Flags for Good show, which I always mention. And if you're a viewer, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that this week. I've got one of their new shirts on. They have branched out into apparel other than just the hat that Michael always wears that I have sometimes in the background. So yeah, and throughout this episode, I am wearing the Tennessee flag version of the shirt. So yeah, go over there, check them out. You can go to flagsforgood.com/flagged4content, for like the number, and use code flagged4content, spelled the same way, at checkout. Whether you're getting flags, apparel, whatever, you'll get yourself a 10% discount and help the show out as well. So thanks as always to Flags for Good, and thanks for y'all using the code, going to the site, all that good stuff. Not a whole lot I wanted to get into this week because we've got a thrilling episode. This is one of the better. I like to think I get better all the time at this, and this one felt really good in the moment and in the edit. So yeah, I'm excited to go ahead and get into it. We do go into some very interesting stuff on the Patreon. That'll be episode 68.5 over there. And I bring up the Patreon not just for that and to hopefully get people to join it, but I was going to say, if you do join it, go ahead and go to the Patreon website itself, which is just patreon.com/flaggedforcontent, all spelled out, FOR in this case, because I've heard that Apple has started to integrate it, but if you sign up through Apple's integration, Apple gets a cut that I would otherwise get. So if you do want to sign up for the Patreon, basically just go to patreon.com/flaggedforcontent and do it that way, regardless of where you listen otherwise. And yeah, like I said, pretty light on announcements this week. This episode was a blast. Finally got to talk to Jason Saber. We had been kind of connecting over social media for a couple of years now, and finally got to sit down with the man himself. This is probably not the only time that I'll have Jason on, for reasons that you'll see. We get to a lot, and there's a lot left uncovered, undug up, whatever. We uncover a lot, there's a lot left covered. You get it. Without any further ado than I've already done, let's go ahead and get into episode 68 with Jason Saber. Folks, you're going to be happy because we have a regular contributor to the Vex community on this week. You know him as the author of County Flags of England, Scotland, and Wales. You know him as a regular contributor to Flags of the World in all of its forms. And you know him as a creator and editor of the British County Flags website. It's Jason Saber!
Hello, thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here.
It's fantastic to finally get you on. We have, I guess, chatted in some forms, mostly Twitter, tagging each other here and there.
That's right, yes.
For, I guess, at least a couple of years now. But yeah, thrilled to finally have you on. I have read the book. I don't know where. Oh, right here. I was going to say, I know I have it close. But I've read the book, read it the other day in the bath, I think, as I messaged you. And yeah, man,
it's not too heavy, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I didn't get any of it wet, fortunately, so we're all good there.
That's good.
But yeah, how have things been going in your world as of late?
Yes, well, ticking over. It's a bit gloomy this time of year and not a good time for flying flags. So looking forward to the April sunshine where I can get out in the garden and raise a flag or two.
Yeah, fair enough. And where, for our listeners, not to dox yourself, but a broad approximation, like what county or shire, like where are you at in England?
Kent, on the very edge. You can see France from where I live, on a good day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
Yeah, that is very cool. I've been to the corresponding part of France, Dunkirk, I guess, basically.
that's right, yeah.
Where you could see a cross and everything, but
yes, I've done that. I mean, as I say, you can regularly see France, but it's sometimes interesting to cross and look back and see England in the same fashion. So
I bet
it's a nice comparison to make.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can imagine. We in America can't. We don't really have an analog for that, but
Well, you're a bit too large to allow you to do that, I think.
Yeah. There are certain parts. Located. Well, here in Chattanooga too, it's like there's a mountain like pretty much right where downtown is, like just outside. And they claim you can see 7 states from it. You can realistically probably see 3. You can see, obviously Tennessee, where we are. You can see Georgia, where it intersects more or less. And I think like on a very clear day, you can see North Carolina. But, again, those are states, not completely different countries. So.
Well, it's a similar arrangement, isn't it? You get the same access. So.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jason. Well, we have a ton to go into today. I'm going to let the VexHeads know what's on the flagpole for this episode. We've got our usual over and underrated flags, maybe a little bonus even. We'll go through the British county flags, obviously, and get a few listener questions in near the end. And on the Patreon, we'll get in depth on a few flags that Jason has created for British counties. But first, before we get into any of that, Jason, I like to ask my guests, what got you into flags in the first place?
Well, as a youngster, I was always very conscious of colours. I can remember from first years when I was really conscious of the world, I was even attributing colours to days of the week. Each day had a specific colour.
Okay.
So when flags came into my view, it was naturally something I gravitated towards. And additionally to that, my father had already been quite interested in flags since he was a boy. He'd actually made one with his elder brother and raised it. So flags were just a constant sort of theme in the household. And because of that, there were a couple of flag books around. And the first one I remember very clearly was the Ladybird Book of Flags, which was this colourful book, so full of wonderful illustrations of flags. It didn't just have flags flat on a page, but they were actually shown flying as illustrations. So that just naturally caught your eye.
Right.
And I particularly remember because Denmark and England are opposites. One's a white cross on red, the other's a red cross on white.
Yeah.
And they were located on adjacent pages in the same position on the page, and you could flip the page one way or the other, and it flipped between the two. And as a youngster, that was really quite an intriguing.
I can imagine.
And then I just devoured that book, and it then led to me learning about the countries, and from there I learned about the planet, and flags were my gateway to the world, really, and everything in it.
Yeah, fantastic. So, wait, so you may have already mentioned, what was the book called?
The Ladybird Book of Flags. Ladybird was a series of books for children in a whole range of subjects, particularly in historical themes and epochs and stories. And Flags was just one of them, but it was a seminal work in my youth, I think you could describe it as.
Gotcha. Yeah, and if you were to make like an educated guess, what do you know, like around what year that would have been? Because I know a lot of flags have changed in the meantime. I'm just
certainly yes.
Curious.
I'm not sure when it was printed, but I would have been looking at it about 1966, 67, somewhere around there.
Gotcha. Yeah. So there's a few that have changed for sure
Hmm.
in the meantime, which obviously, as a flag enthusiast, you've kept up with. But
Oh, certainly. I track them all.
yeah, right.
And I have expanded the library considerably since then, as you might imagine.
Right. I mean, not just your own library, but the library of British county flags, which again we'll get into. But
Well, that's
yeah,
true. Yes. Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, yeah. Props to you, which will definitely be given. All right, perfect. So that's what got you into flags. Now's the point I usually ask my guest, what's an over or underrated flag? I think you've got like kind of a twist on that, in a sense, anyway. I'll let you start where you like.
Well, in terms of underrated flags, there are two that I've always thought were excellent, but little commented upon, or when noted, usually sort of bit disdainfully mentioned. Now, the one I think doesn't get enough kudos is the flag of the Central African Republic, because sometimes I think people look at it and just sort of dismiss it as something that was just cobbled together because it's so many colours and stripes and so on. But actually, I think it has some admirable qualities. It's very cleverly designed because it combines red, white, and blue of France, and therefore, in a more general sense, Europe, with the red, yellow, and green of Africa. And the common colour between the two is the red, which binds all the other stripes together. And the red also refers to the blood of humanity. So I think it's a really admirable set of ideals that are encompassed in a very simple design. And in addition to that, it's very striking when you see it. The colours just leap out at you. And if you when it's placed along the flags of its sister African countries, it's much more distinctive because a lot of them are just regular tricolours, and or most of them are vertical. You have a few variations of that, but this one is particularly distinctive. It's a very different and original design, in my opinion. So I think it deserves more praise than it normally receives.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I had honestly never made the connection between all those colors until you pointed it out.
Well, that's
I
what I think a lot of people don't realise. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never like I have like obviously as a lot of the viewers can see, maybe you can depending on your where the screen's at right now. But I have like the bunting around the room here,
Mm-hmm.
and the CAR flag is directly like right here to me. Like I can very easily see it. And it's always been one of my least favorite flags. I think in large part because of that red bar through the middle that I just did not understand what it was doing there. The star seems a little too small in my opinion, but I don't know what else you would do with it, etc. But I had never. And for the listeners and viewers, we did not talk about this beforehand. I knew this was going to be one of the flags, but I did not know the color thing, and that is truly and frankly like fascinating. Um, Never would have put that together. The blood thing makes sense. I think I had assumed that it was basically just as most red is on flags, like the blood spilled to create
Mm-hmm.
the nation or whatever, how it usually is. Um, yeah, I've never seen it in the light that you just put it in though. And that's fascinating.
Well, I think the problem with flags often is that initially a flag has just got to appeal to you. It's got to shout out, and you see it and you think it looks
Yeah.
good. And that one does for me. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and that's why I brought it up as an underrated flag, because I think the feelings that you expressed are fairly common. But for me, I've never felt that way. It just appeals to me because it's a colourful combination. But the other thing is, once you look into the symbolism and history of the flag, it puts it into a different context and gives it more meaning. So it's a balance
Right.
between basically the appeal of the design per se and the symbolism and the uh, value and the point of the arrangement behind it. It enhances the view that you see initially.
Yeah, absolutely. I do wonder also if there's anything to it being the Central African Republic and that red stripe being central in the flag, there's probably nothing there. I'm probably reading into stuff that doesn't exist. But
It's an interesting idea, though. I hadn't thought of that, but
yeah.
it's something to consider, I guess.
Yeah. It's probably nothing, but worth looking into. All right.
And the star in the top left. I mean, that is just a symbol of a new light, new dawn, moving forwards. I mean, that was appropriate when they became independent. I think that made certain sense there.
And it does look good on the blue that they wisely chose to put as the top stripe there too.
Certainly, yeah, they thought of that, didn't they? They didn't throw it on the yellow, for instance, or the white, which would
right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was some thought. Speaking of another flag that has a star in more of an interesting place, really. You've got another underrated here. Go into that one.
Nauru. I think Nauru is probably my favourite national flag. And the reason for that is because it's very distinctive. It doesn't look like any other national flag. It's composed of just 3 elements, and yet you can read so much into it, because the blue is obviously the Pacific Ocean. The yellow line through the middle, that's the equator. The white star is Nauru's position just beneath where the equator is located. And the 12 points refer to the 12 tribes that live on the island. So it encompasses its entire presentation to the world in a set of very simple 3 elements, which I also think happen to look really attractive. Really nice looking arrangement of colours and design there. I think it does exactly what a flag is meant to do.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Nauru is one of, if I had 5 underrateds, I have done one where I've listed an underrated here or there, but that one is definitely up there. I really, really like that flag. As you mentioned, for some reason, like the colors just do it for me. Like, I can't really put it in a better way than that, but the colors absolutely work together.
Yeah.
The yellow, the dark blue, the white, and as we kind of mentioned, like went into the star being like, what would you even call that? It's not it's like anti-canton, like, I don't know.
I don't think there is a word for it, which is another reason why I think it works so well, because it's particularly original. It's just it's more like a geolocator in a way. Sort of an abstract geolocator.
Yes, yeah. No, that's a really good way to put it. And I think they do it better than most. There are a lot of flags that are, quote unquote, like you said, like geolocation type things. Or they have, this many stars because there's this many islands or territories or whatever.
That's right.
But I think Nauru does it better than most. And on top of all that, as we've talked about, and full disclosure, I've already recorded the next episode and we talk about it on there too, but like just the fact that it's so visually appealing.
Definitely.
You can obviously you can bring in the symbolism to that, but if you were to just look at it, not know anything about it, it would still be a very visually appealing flag. And yeah, I have 0 notes on that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. So those are the 2 underrateds, which very good underrateds. Go look those up. Go research those. I know I will be. Let's go ahead and get into the overrated flag.
Well, I'm somewhat reluctant to bring this one up because I don't really like to underrate flags, but
sure, it's a contentious question when I ask people. Yeah.
Well, I can see that, but I'm going to opt for Mississippi, not because I think it's a particularly bad flag. I think it's actually rather well designed. But my bone of contention is obviously the text through the middle of it.
Yes.
I think writing on flags is the most heinous vexillographic sin there is, and it should be avoided at all costs. And additionally to that, I don't really like competitions where the design elements are preordained. I don't think that's fair to the creator.
Right, yes.
I think that impinges upon the creativity. And telling someone, well, we want you to design our flag, but it's got to have this on it. Well, I just feel that doesn't work. So, and as it is, if you imagine the flag of Mississippi without the script through it, it would work just as well and look much better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it gets a lot of praise because it is, in every way, better than the former flag of Mississippi.
Absolutely. Goes without saying.
Which listeners to this show probably already know. But if you don't, it was the Confederate battle flag, the cross, like the one that you're thinking of in Canton with blue, or well, red, white, blue stripes, I believe in that order, top to bottom. And so, yeah, it was designed, as you mentioned, well, one, in a hurry, and two, with those exact kind of, it has to have "In God We Trust" on it. So that kind of hamstrings you a little bit as a designer to bring those words in, I guess, like an organic-ish way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they did that as well as could be reasonably expected by including it kind of in the circle of stars, etc. But it's still an unfortunate fact of that flag. One, that it had to be designed, like that they had that missive in the first place, and two, that it, that it did end up on there. But in that sense, it had to. Yeah. The Mississippi flag is weird to me. I think I've mentioned it on the show before, but like the way that a lot of people get songs stuck in their head, a lot of my listeners and viewers, and myself included, get flags stuck in their head occasionally. Yes. And for some reason, I had the Mississippi flag just stuck in my head for so long. And I was like, this is maybe not a good flag, but this is such a step up. Even if you ignore the kind of like implications of the Confederate battle cross and everything, it's such a step up. But do I wish it didn't have words on it? Oh my God, yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
Well, see, that's how I feel, is that they made such a good effort. There was all these laudable reasons for changing it, and they almost got to a really great flag, but they couldn't quite bring themselves to make it perfect. That's how I feel. They just missed out the last hit point there. I mean, they got that 95% of the way, I think, with that design.
But like Ted K likes to mention, every quote unquote, because he hates the term bad flag, but every quote unquote bad flag has a good flag dying to get out. So like, I think Absolutely. If they drop that, change a couple things around, they've got one of the better American state flags, which we don't have many. Yeah.
And that's why I chose it, because I feel that it's almost perfect, and it could be easily made perfect. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. So we got through the what got you into flags, over and underrated. We will go ahead and get into the main section, which is obviously going to be the county flags of England, Scotland, and Wales, as the book says right here. But before we get into that, we are going to take a brief ad break. We will be right back and see you all on the other side. Okay, and we are back, more with Jason Saber, who has, obviously, as I'm showing in the video, for those who can watch, written the book on county flags of England, Scotland, and Wales. And Jason, I was just, I'm curious, like, what made you write this book in the first place? Was there kind of a vacuum there that you were seeking to fill, or?
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. I was actually involved with establishing a number of these flags, but in so doing, I also realised that there was a lot of confusion about what a flag for a county was. People confuse those with council coats of arms, some of which had been deployed as flags, others which hadn't been officially approved. It was a bit of a mess of confusion, and also just general misunderstanding of how flags were actually worked, or how they would arranged or registered, or so forth. So I just needed what you might call a glove box guide, something you could just put your hand on and quickly understand as best you could as best I could put it together of what this whole situation is about.
Yeah, and to that point, like, it reads perfectly to that point. Like, you don't give, it's this thick, which is, I think, exactly as thick as it needs to be. You give the notes on the flags, you give notes on designers, the elements, etc. Like, I was able to read this pretty much cover to cover in, like, I don't know, like 2 days, like parts of 2 days. And also not just like read it in 2 days, but like soak it up in like 2 days.
Right.
So I think I know well, I'll say this. I thought I knew the county flags. Now I am pretty certain that I know them. And this has absolutely helped. So
that's very gratifying to hear. It's done its job. I'm glad to hear it.
Well, good. Yeah. No, it was a fantastic read. I'm wondering, all right, are there any flags that you would like to shout out?
Well, the one that has always caught my eye, and I've been grateful to be part of its registration process, was Merioneth, because I think it's really the one, obviously, behind you there. It's so distinctive. I mean, it's very different, and you couldn't possibly confuse it with anything else. I don't think there's a flag in the whole world I've ever seen that looks anything like it. And I think somewhat like we mentioned with Nauru, the colour scheme is perfect. White, blue, and a nice golden yellow. And I just think it resonates with me so well. And people often wonder what it's all about. They joke about it because it's so different. But in a sense, that it's like a snapshot of the county, because the whole point about it was that it, as far as I can tell from what I've researched about it, it's supposed to depict a scene from the county on a mountain that sits there called Cader Idris, and goats would graze on that mountain, and then the sun would come up behind it. So you could, if you were so inclined, you could actually just draw a landscape of that and put that up on a flag. But of course, that wouldn't be a very good flag. But if you do it in an abstract fashion, it works perfectly. It's an encapsulation of the county and a nice symbolic design that I think just works splendidly.
Yeah, this one is very interesting. It's one I've had up in the background before. And I don't own flags that I don't think are interesting in one way or the other. But yeah, like the way that I think this was one of the first, we'll call it British county flags that I owned.
Really?
Because exactly what you were saying, because it is so distinct. It could not be confused for anything else. And just the design of it, like, I like to take as a millennial, I like to think that these are just 3 goats, like, just yeeting themselves into the sun.
That's what a lot of people think.
Throwing themselves at this fire or something.
Yeah.
But as you've explained it, I can understand how it would, not be that too.
If people see it that way and they remember it for that reason, that's fine. So be it.
No, yeah, honestly,
but the symbolism behind it is it's a depiction of the county, so it works in both ways, I think, on different levels.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Like, we've talked a lot on the show about just if a flag sticks in your mind, which I mentioned with Mississippi in the last segment. But if a flag sticks in your mind, it does not super matter what the elements are. If it sticks in your mind enough, you will go online and you'll look up what those elements mean. But it has to be in your head for you to do that, for you to bother doing that, I guess, is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so like briefly, and I know you don't want to take too much credit or whatever, but you had a hand in this one. you said,
Well,
or more than a hand, or
I was aware of the design because it had been used as a seal by the former council,
okay, right,
the local authority. And then a bit more digging, we found that there were plates and framed pictures of that seal. So it was already part of the heritage of the county.
yeah,
And it was the natural next step to get it registered. And I managed to do that by making contact with a local running group in the county. They were long distance runners. And I contacted them, said, look, are you aware of your heritage with this design? It would be nice for you to have this, maybe at some of your meets. And they jumped for it. They were very keen. And because of them, because the thing is, to get registration, you can't just call up and say, this is me and I want this. You need to have some in-county support and
right,
interest with
yeah,
it. And
yeah.
and as a significant organisation in the county, they managed to do that. I told them what we needed and how to go about it, and they went ahead with it, and it all came about. So I was quite pleased with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love. Sorry, I was trying to turn to it in the book, and you got here that it derived from the description of a banner borne by the men of the county at the Battle of Agincourt, which obviously a lot of things stem from that.
Mm-hmm.
In the 17th century poem of the same name by Michael Drayton. Here he wrote, 3 goats dancing against a rising sun. The shield was blue, the sun golden, and the goats white. And yeah, I mean, if you were to take, I think Christoph Hook also takes this approach when he designs flags for Czech cities and towns, is taking basically descriptions like that or coats of arms, etc., and kind of like visualizing what that would look like in a flag form, which it sounds like is what you did here.
Absolutely, exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's go into the other one behind me here. At least the viewers can see it. It is the flag of Leicestershire, if I'm saying that correctly.
You are, yes. A lot of people want to say Leicestershire. I'm aware of that, but it's actually Leicestershire.
Or Leicestershire, or, there's a lot of ways Americans could mess that up, I think.
Yeah, no, but you got it right.
I try. But yeah, so if you could briefly describe the design elements first so that the listeners know what we're looking at, and then kind of go into the details.
Right. Well, there are 3 essential elements there. The base of it is a red and white serrated background. On the red part, you have a white flower device, which is called a cinquefoil, and obviously below you see a running fox. And the white and the red are opposite of the backgrounds, obviously, so that they can stand out well. Now, the reason for that choice is because they're all symbols that have been used in the county over the years, several centuries, in fact. And my thinking was to synthesize the 3 different elements there in what I hoped was a balanced arrangement so that you could cover all the symbolism and the history at one fell swoop. So the background, the red and white serration there, that was used by the de Montfort family, the local nobility. Simon de Montfort was actually considered a progenitor of democracy because he combated the king and initiated parliament, and there's quite a long and trenchant history behind his activity, but that's why he's quite revered in the county, and you'll see the red and white zigzags on a number of the civic arms across the county in different towns there. And also the local council, the difference is that the de Montfort arms were actually vertical, but the county council uses them in a horizontal fashion, and I thought that lent itself very well to a form of a flag. So that was the obvious background for that. The cinquefoil, there is a school of thought that it actually extends back to Viking use a further 500 years, because the design has been found on stonework in the county. So
Oh, really?
who knows? Yeah, it could
Like
be that
the
old.
cinquefoil itself has?
Yes,
Oh,
and they
okay.
think it might have been brought over by a Viking invader, but that's a speculation, but who knows? And then the fox itself was it has a the reason it appeared in the county because it was basically where fox hunting was pretty much initiated and publicised and much used, much pursued there. But over the centuries, it's kind of superseded that point. It's not just become a local motif.
Right.
It just represents the county itself, because you see it in use. It's used, for instance, with the county cricket team. They're called the Foxes. Leicester football team is called the Foxes. The cricket team was actually using the device itself on its caps in the late 19th century, and then the county council was awarded the design in its arms some 30 years later. But it's just very strongly rooted in the county, and there is actually you could buy. I have seen a Christmas card which says "Greetings from Leicestershire" on it with a red fox on the front cover. So I thought, well, that says it all. So
okay,
that combination of elements works perfectly together, I think.
Right. I mean, that all sounds like it very much says Leicestershire. I was going to ask, like, kind of to that point, really. If you're in another part of England that isn't Leicestershire, and you see something like, maybe you see like a product or something, I guess like it would probably say made in Leicestershire. But like, if there's something that only has like that red fox on it, would you know that's from Leicestershire? Like, is it a distinct enough or known enough quantity that people can look at that fox and be like, oh, that's from Leicestershire?
Well, I think so. I mean, that's certainly how it is for me. When I see a fox, I know immediately that represents Leicestershire, and that's why I thought it was the obvious choice to include. And so far as I can tell, most inhabitants have felt the same. It just immediately makes sense to them.
Yeah, no, that
because there is a huge amount of use. A lot of organisations, sports clubs, and so forth. I lost count how many that make use of the fox in their insignia. So
okay. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the one that was called the fox. Yeah, foxes. Yeah.
But I mean, those just two. I think there's about 30 clubs and societies that have it.
Right, and part of the reason I wanted to bring up Leicestershire is because in the book, you've got two of them here. One, I guess, was the original design, and one was the one that ended up the design. So
yeah, the lower one was my original submission, and then the Flag Institute changed it slightly for registration. I thought I'd put them both in because both flags exist, because it was already publicised and promoted and manufactured prior to registration, so you'll see both of them. So it made sense to have them both
gotcha.
in the book.
And do you have any, I was just going to ask, like, do you have any personal ties to Leicestershire or Merioneth or Merioneth?
I don't. I just like designs, and I like to I like to be involved in establishing meaningful flags that are hopefully both well designed and have some local history and heritage involved in them.
Fair enough. Gotcha.
But it's not just a question of me imposing it. I come up with the idea, and then hopefully I can find someone local who agrees with me, and then we can launch a joint campaign to seek that registration, which is exactly what happened with Leicestershire, which I detail in the book a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Right. There were like, I guess like a couple pairs of them that I wanted to bring up and just kind of like, get your thoughts on. So I know down in the southwest of England, there is obviously at the very southwest of England, there's Cornwall, which has a strong Celtic heritage, like related to Brittany, etc., like Brittany in France, etc., etc. And they had the, what is it, St. Piran's cross?
Correct. Yeah.
So, yeah. For, I guess, like a while. I don't remember. But they'd had it at least as a local symbol for quite a while, if I remember.
Well, it was first mentioned in print in 1838, I think.
1838, yeah. You literally, You
right.
just said the year that I was looking at.
But it's likely, though, that it extends way back into the Middle Ages.
Right.
There are families that resemble it. So.
Yeah, and I guess, like, I mean, the black and white colors are definitely, like, on the Brittany flag, like, you know, they kind of hearken to each other in a certain sense. I was wondering about because I know, like, Cornwall and Devon have, and this is the way I understand it, I may be wrong, but they have some kind of, like, outstanding, like, quote unquote rivalry, or I don't know if rivalry is even the best. Well, okay, you're nodding, so that can't be too wrong. But it seems like, so Devon, very much more recently than 1893, created or got their own flag. And do you think that has anything to do with that rivalry with Cornwall?
Well, it's not so much the rivalry as sort of, I would say, I don't want to put a pejorative term, but it's a bit of envy, because obviously they could see Cornish flags on the back of vehicles and being used to promote Cornish products. And it just seemed obvious that they needed something comparable that they could use to promote their county. I mean, flags are an obvious way to push forward a local identity. If you say, this is us and here we are and this is our flag, everyone can get a clear image of that you know, that it imposes that place on your mind.
Yeah.
And Cornwall could do that and Devon couldn't. So they were keen to emulate them and choose something that they could wave as well. And it's an extremely popular flag, I have to say. I think the Cornish took umbrage with it a bit because they thought that really they just took their own flag and played around with it.
Made part of it green. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, flags inevitably are going to resemble each other, aren't they? Because
I mean,
there's only so many different designs you can really put out, and the color scheme is certainly, it has a meaning. You know, I can't remember exactly to what level of detail I referred to it in the book, but it recalls the colours of sports teams and
that's
earlier designs, and it also is supposed to reflect the colours of the landscape of the county.
Right. So that Devon flag was adopted 2003, as you say in here. Do you think that was kind of the, and if not, what do you think was the impetus for a lot of British counties getting their own flag? Because this did not exist other than in Cornwall, a few other counties, a lot of them historical, that had historical symbols to fall back on, like Essex or whatever. Do you think, like, was Devon the first domino to kind of fall, or was that a different one that I'm just not looking at?
That was really the first popular flag of the modern era. As you say, Kent, Essex, Northumberland, they had long established designs that had existed as coats of arms prior to being deployed as flags. But Devon was the first to initiate a popular flag contest of that in that fashion.
Right, because I imagine, Devon is where you get, what's the Dorset. Like, I mean, Dorset, right next door to Devon. I assume they saw Devon's and were like, okay, let's get on this bandwagon. Let's keep doing that.
Exactly what happened. Yes, I stumbled across the Dorset flag just browsing the internet for flag-related themes, as I tend to do.
Yeah.
And there was a blog there. There was a discussion between two men from Dorset. One who was an expatriate, Stephen Coombs, living in Sweden, and the other was Dave White, who was resident there. And they had come up with this design, and it just struck me as very different and very interesting. And when I read about the reasons for the colour scheme, I just thought, well, that's excellent. And I just made contact with Dave, and I encouraged him to push it forward as the proposed flag. And eventually, the burgeoning popularity of that design brought the local council in, who thought that rather than just accepting a design, they ought to have a competition, which they duly did, and that one won it by yards, because it was just very popular by that time.
Yeah.
And I just feel that it's an unusual colour scheme. You don't see
It is
colours like that in that arrangement very often. A yellow flag is unusual, just generally. But it's well designed, because Stephen Coombs, who initiated the idea, was very well versed in heraldic tinctures and practices, so he thought that one through.
That actually brings me to a good next point. When you said heraldic tinctures and everything, why do you think British county flags are so much better than U.S. state flags? Does it tie into heraldry, the reason that they are just so much more visually appealing?
Well, I mean, I think the fundamental problem with American flags is that most of them are, as we all know, seals on bed sheets.
Yeah.
And seals are very complicated, intricate devices that work well in a static environment, on a document, say, or on the chamber wall or something like that, but or in their original intention, if you seal an envelope with it on the wax, which is what a seal originally was, that's how it works. But that level of detail does not translate well as a flag. And I think a lot of people, as I understand it, I mean, I'm not an expert, but what I understand on American state flags, a lot of them were adaptations of military banners. And they tend to be, they tend to show a lot of colour, the military colours and the insignia and so forth. And using the seal in that fashion is what led to the state flags. But there's so much detail. They don't work on a piece of cloth flapping 30 feet in the air, 50 feet away. You can't see that much with that detail. They're not remotely distinctive. And they just don't work. As flags, they don't work because they don't catch the eye. You don't see it.
They don't.
There's nothing really there to marvel at. And they don't. Also, I don't think they stir the soul. You can't look and say, "Wow, look at that! That's amazing."
That's a really good way to put it. Yes. Yeah. No, sorry. I was hoping you would keep talking. I didn't mean to cut you off. No, but yeah, that is honestly the best way, probably the best way I've heard anybody put it. They do not stir the soul. Like, you look at the flag of a state like, like my immediate neighbor to the north is Kentucky, and it's just two guys shaking hands in a seal or something. Pennsylvania is similar, like the old Utah one that they got away from. Like, and honestly, like, I would go even further to say that those things hardly work as seals, let alone as on flags. Yeah. Because, like, you're talking about, like, a seal originally used to be like just something you would, put down in wax, or, more or less on something. And, like, I honestly don't know how, like, say the Missouri state flag, for example, that has so many stars on this little shield that the bears are supporters for, and then it has the exact same number of stars around the edge, which you don't need because you've already had it. And, like, but yeah, if you were like, I know one of my past guests has that as a tattoo, and they had to, like, scrimp on some of the stars. Like, they had to literally, like, have fewer stars because the tattoo artist was like, I really know how to work with this.
I dread to think how painful that was.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I don't have any myself. I might get a Tennessee TriStar at some point.
But you see, I think at the time it was probably the easiest. Once they all felt that they needed flags as a mark of statehood, basically, I think they all felt it was easiest just to take an existing design from a military banner or what have you and just throw
Yeah.
it onto blue
Yeah.
cloth because blue was a good background and it stood out against the blue a bit, and they went with that and they didn't give it any more thought. But about 100, 150 years later, we've had some experience and we can see how these things work or don't work. And you can reflect upon Missouri, for instance. Well, they've got a bear there. I think it's a golden disc, isn't it, or something like that? Off the top of my head.
Yeah. There's like a golden like crescent moon that's facing like upward. Like
Right. Well,
face.
I mean, you could take that bear and put it on a golden background and work with that per se, and then it would work really well. I mean, why not? A bear is a fantastic creature to depict on your flag.
I was gonna say it's very heraldic, and I mean California has a bear, and California's flag even has words on it, and people still love the hell out of it. Like,
was it Ted Kay? I think it was Ted Kay who thinks that there's a good flag waiting. You mentioned a good flag waiting.
Yeah.
I think with all of these, there are elements that you could adapt and fashion into a flag, which I think Christoph tends to do in Czechia with his designs. He takes the essential elements out of arms and creates lovely flags from them.
Yeah, exactly. Really well. Yeah. It's just, it's a whole different tradition, and we're trying to dig ourselves out of it, but we're digging ourselves out of it in a kind of like modern 21st century way, where a lot of the flags do tend to, and I hate to say it, but a lot of the new redesigns tend to look a little advertising for me.
Corporate logo type.
Logo is a good way to put it. Because in the 21st century, they're geared toward that, right? Like you and not unwisely, but you want to put that on a patch on a backpack or a magnet or a, what have you. And so you're like, your 21st century brain is kind of geared toward that. Whereas I think in England, Scotland, Wales, a lot of places like that have more of a heraldic, Czechia included, tradition, you want to hearken back to those symbols and make something new from them, instead of just like Utah being like, all right, we love a beehive. A hexagon is like what bees make. There's mountains, like, you gear it differently, I think, in both cases. And it's just interesting to me to see the kind of difference in approach that both the UK and the US have, I think in that sense.
A lot of the modern or recent flags have come up in America from towns and counties and to some extent states. I think there's a lot riding on the stylization.
Yes.
Because, as you say, a lot of them have this sort of logo appearance. I mean, and I think that's sometimes a bit lacking. Well, it's a bit soulless. It doesn't quite have that living feeling about it.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
But they're on the right tracks. But it's still tending towards a sort of corporate logo identity a bit, I feel.
Right. See, our thing is we can't pull from heraldry, because like any heraldry that the states have is more or less or is identical to the seal. Like, like we will misname something. We'll misname a seal as a coat of arms. And we'll just kind of go from that and be like, in Utah's case, like, yeah, there's a beehive on there. There's also an eagle carrying 2 US flags. Obviously, they're not going to include that. But we just have less to draw on other than, established state symbols like the beehive for Utah. And then regional things like mountains. I guess I'm going to be using Utah a lot here in this example. But like, yeah, I mean, like geographical features and existing state seals, which are already pretty weak. Now, you have examples like in, I think whenever this comes out, the episode with Alan Hardy, we had talked about some of the redesigns for Missouri, which we've talked about Missouri here a little bit. And they just do take that like upside down, or not upside down, but that crescent moon that kind of faces upwards, takes the star. I think a couple of them had a bear or two in there, and then that's like it. So as you mentioned, like Krzysztof and Czechia taking kind of the elements of the thing. It's just that we have fewer elements. Like Missouri and Utah might be the best two. I don't know what you would take out of Kentucky or Pennsylvania. There's not much.
I mean, I think a lot of American flags, for instance, Milwaukee. I mean, they throw in everything they can think of it. But because you have so much there, you've got quite a choice to take out of it. And my idea was to focus on they've got a stalk of, I think it's a stalk of corn or something, and they've got a big gear wheel. So those two elements to me represent agriculture and industry. Yeah, they've got about 1,000 different other bits on there to promote the same idea. But those are all, to me, that's all you need. And then you put those against the blue background, and they've got a number of wavy lines that you can barely see. Well, my idea was just to have blue and white wavy lines, about 4 of them, because that's a traditional heraldic representation of water. And then that's it. There's 3 elements there that tell the story together, in my view. I think that, so there are always things that you can, I'd say about 90% of the time, there are things that you can take out of a badly designed flag to make a good one. And I think there are options there.
Yeah.
But one thing I would add, though, is that I get a bit bored seeing stars on American flags. I think there's a sort of a mindset that anything American has to have a star on it.
You and me both.
Well, there you go. I mean, let's have a bit of originality. I'm sure there are other, for instance, you mentioned Pennsylvania. They're known as the Keystone State, and there are a myriad designs I've seen with Keystone design. I think it's perfect. It works very well. It's ideal for a flag. It's a very simple shape to put on a flag, and there's no need for any stars there. So I'm sure there are comparable possibilities elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there are symbols to draw on. They just generally aren't in the state seals. But anyway, all right. So we went way in depth on that, which I absolutely appreciate. But that does mean we have to go to another break, and we will catch y'all in part 3 with the listener questions and maybe a little bit extra. We'll see what happens. Anyway, see you on the other side.
Are you interested in the weird, the occult, or the anomalous?
How does a comedic and supernatural spin on history sound?
We're popping up here to tell you about our podcast, Supernatural Selection, a weekly dive into all things weird with professional amateurs.
We research and uncover fascinating things about our often spooky and strange history and share them with you a couple of hours at a time.
Like, did you know that in 1955, a farmhouse in Kentucky was besieged for a night by extraterrestrial goblins?
Or that the Mothman is still being cited to this very day?
And that the craziest thing published online very well may be Time Cube?
If you want more than deep dives into strange topics, we also have our Weekend Weird episodes.
All the weirdest and buck-wild news we can find on the web delivered hot to you.
Plus, as a bonus, we have a weekly dive into pop culture with our other show, The Distraction Hole.
Because, well, you shouldn't work all the time.
So, if you want to give the show a try, hit up supernatpod.rocks and add the show to your favorite podcatcher or stream right on site. 2 great shows, 1 feed.
Join us, won't you?
Or you'll be sorry.
Remember, that is supernatpod.rocks for an immature audience. Don't let your mom know we're doing this.
All right, we are back. The last part 3, with Jason Saber here. And it's going to be, I think, pretty much entirely listener questions from this point. You guys had some good ones, and I want to make sure that Jason gets to them. So we'll just start with the start, as we always say on the show. Flags in Focus, Tareth Peacock, former guest on the show, probably a future guest on the show as well, asks, why is the Bedfordshire flag the best of all county flags?
Right. I think that's a bit of a loaded question, given it's Tereth's home county flag. So
Yep.
I can see why he thinks that. I would agree, though, that it has what I could refer to as shelf shouts. I think it does get your attention. Because of the combination of coloured panels and blue and white wavy lines, it is certainly not something you can ignore. You see it and it's going to attract you.
Yeah.
And I think in that regard, it's an avowedly heraldic design. And in that way, it's actually somewhat reminiscent of Maryland, because that is also a strong heraldic design, and you can't ignore it. And like it or not, it's going to take your attention for sure.
Right.
And I think that's why it works. But in addition to that, it's also very meaningful, because the blue and white wavy lines represent the River Ouse, which flows right through the county, and is a significant part of its background and history and heritage. And the other coloured panels and the shells derive from the arms of local nobility, who were very effective in informing the county and part of its history. So it works both as an impactful design, and it conveys a lot of historical symbolism as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And now that we're like talking about it, looking at it, and we've gone through the Central African Republic one, like there's a couple similarities. Not, it's not super similar, but that band going down the middle there that separates everything is definitely doing a lot for that flag. Yeah. I will admit to Tereth, I guess, that the Bedfordshire flag is one of the better ones that y'all have. He had another question. He was heavy on the questions this time. He was asking, and I think you've answered this elsewhere, but how do we get the Brecknockshire flag, the best non-official county flag ever, in parentheses, officially over the line?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, you need to ask the Flag Institute, because they operate the registry, which contains all of these flags.
That's fair.
But what it boils down to is you need local support. And so far, I mean, that design has been around for about a decade or more now. And it's used by a local wildlife organisation. It's taken by the county darts team on their competitions. I've seen recently pictures of that flag in use, with them using that. And it's also been used, it was the inspiration for a podcast about Welsh politics called Like a Bat Out of Hay, because Hay on Wye is a town in the county. Okay. So that was quite a clever play on words, and they featured the flag as part of their promotional material. So it certainly resonates locally. It's also proven popular both in wherever I've seen it discussed by local residents and vexillologists in general. It seems to be quite admired. So I think it's got all the necessary qualities for registration. The problem is that the Flag Institute requires some form of official sanction to register a flag. And that has generally meant either a local county council, or what we have in this country are Lord Lieutenants and High Sheriffs. And these are sort of symbolic offices of the county. I would say offices of state, but they're not actually state, but you get the point. They're local county officials. And in some circumstances, one or the other of those people have lent their support to a flag, which has led to its registration. For Brecknockshire, it doesn't have a local county council anymore because it was considered too small for its own one. So it's now part of a much larger local authority area. And similarly, there is no Lord Lieutenant and there is no High Sheriff. So it's a bit difficult to know who exactly could request its registration. I think it boils down to a local interest group. I know instance, there's a group there called the Brecknockshire Society, which is the county town. I believe they run a museum there, a local history museum. They'd probably be a very good body to support the design and request its registration. But you have to find someone who's that concerned or interested in establishing a flag county. So it's an uphill struggle, because just because you might be enthusiastic, it doesn't mean to say everyone locally is as enthusiastic or cares, really. So you've got to convince them to be interested. Secondly, you've got to make them interested enough in the existing design to support it. And then thirdly, you've got to get them to contact the Flag Institute to request registration. So there's quite a number of hurdles there.
Okay, so that kind of ties into, and I know I didn't quite preview you on this one, but friend of the show Alex had asked a couple episodes ago that I for James Bowman from Flag of the Fens, who I assume you have some kind of connection with.
Oh yeah, I know.
He had asked, and I forgot to ask James this question, which ties nicely into what you were just saying. But for regional flags like that, because like you were just talking about, you have to get people behind it, you have to have the correct channels, etc. Is there an additional hurdle to getting ones like Exmoor, Black Country, Flag of the Fens? Like, are there additional hurdles to those getting into the Flag Institute, or are the hurdles basically the ones that you just mentioned, where it's you have to get someone?
Yes, I mean, I can't really speak for the Flag Institute, so you'd probably have to ask them.
Sure, yeah.
But,
right.
And I wasn't involved with either Exmoor or the Black Country, but I do know that Black Country's flag was the winner of a competition, so it was specifically established as a result of a purpose-built competition, and I think Exmoor was the same, if I can recall.
Okay, so that sets them a little bit apart. Yeah,
because they've already got a locally sanctioned and arrangement there, and they're tied in with the flag.
It's clear they have a backing. Yeah.
Whereas with the Flag of the Fens, it's it's a different kettle of fish, because James has initiated a design himself, which he's promoted, and for the last, I've forgotten, probably the best part of a decade again, has gradually acquired a burgeoning support, and it's now very well liked by a lot of people in the area. It's used by companies as a promote on their. I think there's a sausage maker that has the label on it, or has the Flag and its label.
Yeah,
I think a local beer or brewery, off the top of my head, it's been supported by a local chief constable of the police, MPs, district councils. So there's a wide degree of support for it. So in my opinion, there's enough there for it to be registered. Quite why it's not getting to that point, you'd have to ask the Flag Institute. I really can't say.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, fair enough. Let's see, what else have we got? Well, we have another one. We have another one from Tereth, and I think you've more or less answered this, but is Merioneth just a day version of the nursery rhyme, Cow Jumped Over the Moon?
Well, that's a cute description, but they're goats, of course, not cows. I can see why you might make the connection, but as I've described, the point of it is it's a symbolic description of a scene from the county, an iconic mountain, and that's really what it's all about, as we've discussed. So,
right. I was going to say, I think we more or less already answered that one, but and then Morgan Underwood 2025 said, "What's the total number of flags for every colony in the British Empire, including USA?" And I think you had sent me a link that answered that one, because it's kind of a hard question to answer.
There was an amazing amount of research done by a couple of members of the Flag Institute.
Yeah.
I think 20 or more so years ago, and they put together this. I don't think it was ever actually published as a book, but it's essentially a book called The Colours of the Fleet, because a lot of these colonial designs are based on an initial naval usage. They've adapted naval ensigns for colonial flags, and they just decided to try and plot every one that's ever been used, and I think we'll find them all in that document.
Right. Gotcha.
There's probably no better source for that question, really.
Yeah, and to that point, I will link that document in the show notes for all the listeners and viewers that want access to it. The final question that we have here is from Zachary Harden, who has been a former guest and is also very active on Flags of the World. I don't know if you know him or not, but
I certainly know his name.
Yeah, he asked I think this is a fantastic question that I was kind of going to ask myself, but what counties were the easiest and hardest to get a flag registered for?
Right. Well, I can only speak from my own experience. I haven't been involved with all of them. I've had involvement to a greater or lesser degree with about 20 of them, I'd say. But amongst those, the easiest one was actually Bedfordshire, which took about 6 weeks from the initial approach. I was contacted by Luke from Bedfordshire, who said, couldn't we get this? You see, the flag is actually an adaptation of the coat of arms of the former county council.
Right.
And he said, well, the council's been abolished. Could we make use of this? And I said, well, yeah, possibly. You need to get the sanction of a local official to make it happen. He contacted the High Sheriff. The High Sheriff said, oh, yeah, great idea. Let's go for it. With that, he applied to the Flag Institute. They saw the local sanctions and said, yep, great. And there you go. 6 weeks later, it was registered. The worst one was Somerset, which took, I think, 7 years from its initial attempt. The guy there wanted to get the flag, a flag for the county established, and he struggled to get support for a long time. And then after about 3 or 4 years, he gave up because he couldn't. The real problem is that there's no specific route by which a flag can be registered. There's no legal process. There's no. There's nothing in paper that says, right, first you have to do this, first you have to do that. It's a bit of a you try it and see how it works kind of deal. And he tried to get local support initially and didn't get anywhere. This was Ed in Somerset. And he got a couple of local noble people high up, the great and the good, to say, yes, that's a good idea, let's go with it. But he hadn't actually settled at that time on a firm design. A few years later, I contacted him. We had done, my colleagues and I had done some research. The Somerset Dragon is probably the oldest flag that we have amongst them. It goes back thousands of years.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was that or Kent or
Somerset is quite likely the most ancient one we have because it conceivably goes back to the windsocks used by the Dacians and Parthians in their conflict with the Romans. So, there's
pretty old
history there.
Pretty old.
But I won't go into the whole history background. But basically, because it had very entrenched history, the dragon was the obvious symbol to use on the flag. He kind of lost his way after a few years. I made contact with him. We started to try and get the process going at the same time. But then, coincidentally, a local law firm and a media group were made aware that there was no actual established registered flag for the county. So they set up a competition just at about the same time that we wanted to reinvigorate the campaign to get the dragon accepted.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do was to just get him to enter the dragon design into the competition, which he did, and he won. But that was 7 years after his initial foray into the attempt. So it all came together at the end, but it was a hell of a struggle.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. From that question, just going off of that, before we get into the end here, do you find? Let me try and think of the best way to put this. do you find that areas that have like a quote unquote longer history like that, as in there are symbols that date back further, do you find that they are easier or more resistant? In this case, it sounds like more resistant, but in others, I can imagine it's maybe easier to get the flag adopted.
Yeah, well, I mean, it swings around about. Sometimes, yes, it is, and sometimes, you see, often, for instance, Warwickshire. Warwickshire is associated with a bear
The
and
bear
a
and the
rabbit.
tree and the
Which is like a tree stump, and that has been very symbolic of Warwickshire for a long time.
Sure.
You go back, and you can see it being used by military regiments and sporting clubs and so forth.
Okay,
It
right.
was also it also featured on the coat of arms that was awarded to the council. The banner of those arms, i.e. the shield from the coat of arms deployed as a cloth, was often promoted as the county flag. Now, it doesn't work that way because the coat of arms belongs to the council only, and no one else can use it.
Right.
But people had a feeling that a flag of Warwickshire with a bear and star was what represented them. So basically, you just needed to get that formalised, and we had to make in cooperation with the Flag Institute, we came up with an idea that was the basic bear and ragged staff, as they called it, the tree stump, without all the extra elements that the council coat of arms had
Right.
on it.
Yeah. Right.
Boiled down to the essential element, and that clearly resonated with the local population. It was there. It was so entrenched in their history that it was just the obvious thing to go for.
Yeah.
But you can. I don't know if that answers your question. I kind of lost track
No,
of it there.
yeah.
But you could compare what we mentioned before, Dorset. Now, Dorset didn't really have a very clear-cut symbolic history. There was nothing that represented them. There was no local device because their coat of arms was based on the coat of arms of England and France, which doesn't really mean anything. They didn't have, I don't know, crossed axes or a daffodil or a rampaging elephant. They didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And that's why it was necessary to conjure up a completely new design, using locally resin colours, but in a completely new pattern. So there wasn't anything to draw upon there. But in most cases, most of the areas in the country have some form of heraldic or symbolic tradition that you can draw from. And it's always the best option, in my opinion, to try and
agree.
go for that if you can, if there's something there. And you'll find that, I mean, like with Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire and so on, there aren't specific heraldic designs that they've taken, but there are traditions that, for instance, in Derbyshire, there is a tradition of using a rose there, and so it appears on the flag. Nottinghamshire, obviously, there's a long association with the Robin Hood the Archer, and that had already appeared on the logos of local companies and had appeared on the shirt of a local football team as well. So it was an obvious design to go for. Yes, the short answer is where there is a tradition, there's a symbolic tradition, always the best option, I think.
Of course. Yeah. No, it makes total sense. God, I feel like I could talk to you all day, but I think unfortunately we have to kind of shut it down here, except for the Patreon bit. So
I'd like to go on all day too, but
yeah, right. Yeah.
Another time.
So I'll go ahead and ask you. I'll do my plugs after, but what do you have to plug? The book, obviously, the website, anything else that we can kind of find you, follow your work on?
Well, I think the website britishcountyflags.com says it all, really. I put everything in there. The book was really a précis, a shorthand version. I extemporize at enormous length on the website, so it was a bit of a task to actually draw out a paragraph or two from the extensive pages I have on the website.
Right, I can imagine.
But I think everything I want to say about it is on there. I mean, and I do contribute, as you mentioned, to the Flags of the World. So I have other content there that I've provided. But essentially, the website is really me, I would say.
If our viewers and listeners are not familiar with Flags of the World, they should be. So yeah, head on over there. I think it's even FOTW. Is it .com or is it .info? Well, I forget.
I can't remember now. What I normally type is FOTW and flags, and that gets me there.
I usually just I'm not gonna lie. I usually just Google Georgia state flag FOTW, and then it takes me to even the previous versions.
Well, I think that's an example of a very good, effective website. When it works that well.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I'm sure most of our viewers know about it. But anyway, as far as the show's plugs, you guys probably know where you can find us. But if you are one of those new listeners that I just mentioned, anywhere with an @ we are at Flagged for Content, for like the number. And outside of that, I think the best place to find us is our Linktree, which is just linktree.com/flagged4content, all spelled out. That's got the Discord invite if you want to come talk flags with all of us. It's got, you can request guests on the show. You can request that you come on the show, etc., etc. There's a ton of good links over there. So just go ahead and check that out. And Jason, I think that's basically it. Now, I normally I almost always have perfect notes to end the show with. However, on this one occasion, I do not. And I was wondering, could you close the show down for me?
Okay, well, how about let flags unfurled, bring colours to your world.
Bring colours to your world. I love it. I love it. VexHeads, with that, we will catch you all on the fly side and see you next time. Take care. Flag for Content is proud to be sponsored by Flags for Good. Go to flagsforgood.com for more information.